want to talk to you about a thing uh, okay, so I was at a professional wrestling event that we put on Saturday night. If you don't know, we have a professional wrestling promotion. It's called Nation Extreme Wrestling. We sold out 2 shows at Granville Island in Vancouver. We've got a sold out show coming up at the Commodore Ballroom. It's going to be 900 people. It's going to be crazy. Minoru Suzuki's coming up, but I digress. We've got this wrestling promotion, and I was talking to somebody at the bar during the show, and then the couple of people that go to the thing, they watch our content, and one person said, "Hey, you got a lot of uranium companies," and I see on Twitter and Instagram, you're a bit of a lefty. How do you justify representing uranium companies and being a lefty? And I'm glad this person asked the question, because it's something that I think not a lot of people understand. To me, the future of energy, of responsible, clean energy, is nuclear. I just don't think there's any two ways about it. If I was Prime Minister, I would build a dozen nuclear power plants across the middle of Canada in the Great North. I would use them as an excuse to build more towns and cities in areas that currently have none. I would use it as a means of employment and education and advanced infrastructure across the part of Canada that is currently mostly undeveloped. And I don't think it would kill off the bird life or the local moose and caribou. I think it would be an amazing forward step for energy creation in Canada and turn it into the turbine of North America. We could sell that energy down to the US for pennies on the dollar, and it would make the prairies the new Alberta. That's my plan. If I'm ever Prime Minister, I've probably got 18 things to do before that, but I would do that. And the reason I would do that is that nuclear energy is clean. It doesn't create carbon emissions. It does create nuclear waste. That is a thing, but that nuclear waste is a lot more able to be recycled these days. And quite frankly, if we really wanted to, we could just shoot it into the sun. No big deal. It doesn't create a lot of waste, but the waste it does create exists for a long time. It has a half-life of, whatever. So nuclear is not without its issues. And certainly we've seen in earlier stages of its development, notably the 70s and more recently in Fukushima, where they built a nuclear power plant over a fault line, not great. We always get these documentaries through Netflix every few months about the horrors of Chernobyl. Yeah, Chernobyl sucked, but that was nuclear energy in the Soviet era. We've got a few different technologies now, and indeed, nuclear energy can be created not just in massive power plants, but in small modular plants. Submarines, battleships are nuclear powered. We're at a point now where we can make smaller nukes in many more places, much more safe, with many more fail-safe methods. We don't just have an awooga horn going off when it breaks and everybody run for the hills for the next 100 years. It is now a very much more self-contained situation. So, what gives? Why aren't we making nukes in every suburb? Why isn't there a nuclear power plant in Vancouver? Well, because we've been raised on this mindset that nuclear power is the same as nuclear missiles, that it's evil, that it will leak, that it will make our fish have 3 heads and our kids have no arms. That hasn't happened yet. Now, certainly Fukushima was not a good situation, but you ain't going to find a Fukushima situation in Saskatchewan. Certainly Chernobyl wasn't a good situation, but we've advanced safety and technology and rules a lot further from there. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of other industries where if something goes wrong, the consequences are major. Let's look at East Palestine, where a train came off the rails and oops, now you've got a part of Ohio that's unlivable. So, it doesn't have to be uranium based in order for something to be risky. And indeed, the uranium based stuff nowadays, because nobody wants those Chernobyl incidents, is much different from how it used to be. So for mine, if you want to have green energy in Canada, you've got 4 options, realistically. You've got hydroelectric, which means you've got to go on and flood an area in order for it to work, and runs the risk that a dam might burst. Probably won't happen, but hey. You've got solar, which only works when the lights are on, and quite frankly, if the sun goes down or the clouds come over, it doesn't work unless you have a massive battery that it can charge up During the daytime, solar is really a piecemeal approach to energy. It needs other things to be base load. Same with wind. Wind turbines are fantastic, but the wind doesn't always blow. And when it doesn't, you need either other energy or you need that fat battery that you've been charging while the wind's been blowing. Those big batteries, they don't really exist yet in any real workable form. And in order for them to, you'd have to dig up a lunar landscape full of ores in order to get them to actually be functional. So, you know, you're doing great when you've got an electric vehicle, but if that electric vehicle has been charged with electricity that's coming from a coal plant, you're not really making much of a difference. Then there's nuclear. Now, nuclear energy is 24/7. Doesn't matter what the weather's like or whether the wind is blowing or the tides are going. Nuclear energy produces on an ongoing basis. Does it have risk? Of course. Pretty much everything you do nowadays does. But we are at a point where if you can put a nuclear reactor on the back of a battleship, instead of it having to take up a Springfield-sized town, now we're getting to a point where you could foreseeably see a time when you'd get delivered a uranium pellet that goes into your home power plant and keeps it going for the next 2 years. We ain't there yet, but that will be the place where society ends up. We can use nuclear energy to do all sorts of things that are genuinely going to make a difference on carbon emissions and climate change. So as a lefty, although hey, same as anybody on the left, when I hear about mining, the first thing I think about is the raping of the environment. But let me put you this. If you're digging radioactive uranium out of the ground, are you really making the ground worse for it? Because I kind of think that the local wildlife maybe wants to be less radioactive. If you're pulling it out from a pond, from a lake, maybe you're making the environment better by removing that radioactivity from the natural landscape. Not everything is a positive in the natural environment. If you pull it out and make it some sort of productive use of it, maybe that's better. Now, I realize that people are going to need a little time to get that around their noodle. You know, they're going to have to think about that a bit and reprogram some of their thinking that they've had for the last however many years. But for me, nuclear energy is the solution to a lot of problems, including oil and gas, including coal-fired electricity, including all fossil fuel use. Nuclear energy can get us where we need to go. Now, you're always going to need some oil and gas because plastics, we use plastics. That is a whole different argument. If you want to get rid of plastics, I'm all for it. But let's not assume that paper straws are going to be the solution because those suck. Regardless, nuclear energy is a positive thing. And I really believe that Canada can lead the world by embracing nuclear energy today for two good reasons. One, we've got a lot of room. We've got a lot of space out there, a lot of areas of the country that could use some development, some infrastructure, some employment, and some energy production. Two, it's clean. We don't have earthquakes going across Canada. We don't have flooding going across Saskatchewan. We have the ability to put power plants where they're going to be most left alone and put them all across. And hell, if you want to put them underground, I don't give a shit. We got lots of underground you can use. We got mine shafts all over the place. If you wanted to put nuclear power plants across Canada, I think it would be a boom time for Canada, not just because we could sell the energy, but because we have the uranium to do it. We can fast track uranium mining all over the middle of the country and start pulling it out of the ground in big numbers and feed that desire to be the coal furnace without the coal of North America. And I believe that's going to happen. I believe that we're a short period away from getting modular nuclear reactors that can be used at an industrial level or a municipal level or even a suburban level. I think we're going to get that sooner rather than later. As soon as Netflix stops milking the Chernobyl thing, I think we'll be much closer to it. Now, there's always going to be people that say, not in my backyard, what if? Man, you want to put a nuclear power plant behind my place? I will be fine with that. I would be more fine with that than I am you putting a 5G wireless tower outside my back window. I'll tell you that for $5. So if we're going to get to a place where nuclear energy is going to be acceptable for all, and I think we will, what happens next? Well, what happens next is nuclear energy requires uranium. And in Canada right now, we have a bunch of companies that are ranging from small to large at various stages of exploration that are out there pegging off radioactive land, digging through it to see how radioactive it is, see how high grade the uranium is beneath it, see how economic it would be to take that uranium and extract it, and then sell it on to local companies that can value add, process it, and turn it into electricity. I think that would be an amazing investment. And in fact, I've got 3 companies for you where I think that investment pays off. One, Azincourt. Azincourt Energy. AAZ is the ticker symbol. I love Azincourt because Azincourt has 3 things going for it that I think are absolutely worth noting. One, they have a CEO who will not stop. Alex Clement has been involved in 2 companies that I'm aware of recently, a gold company and a uranium company. Both those companies had headwinds early on, small exploration deals that had people coming at them, short selling them, rumor mills, the whole thing. And Alex Clement, at a time when at both of those companies he could have said, fuck this, I'm out. I'm going to go and just start another shell, get another project. What everybody else does when times get tough in the financial markets in Canada. They say, F this, I'm out, and they show up a month later with another deal. Alex Clement has never done that. Alex Clement stands, says, shoot me all you want, I ain't going anywhere. And he turns these deals around. Clement has fought the good fight when it comes to Nano One. He's fought the good fight at every step of the way. It hasn't always easy, but he's always been a guy who stands up and says, ask me anything. I'll tell you anything, including some of the darker stuff about the public markets that people generally skip. He's a guy who, when it would have been easy to go away, stood up and represented his company, and does to this day. Fucking maniac. Also, his project is good, which, you know, I'm not a technicals guy, but I can see. And he's at the stage right now where it's pre-discovery, right? They know that there's stuff there that's radioactive. They know that there's a grade there. They know they've had some results. But now the rubber is hitting the road. He is doing the drill program, and the next few months, the information will come out of that drill program that will tell everybody whether this is a $12 million company, as it stands, or a $120 million company, as it's been, or beyond. They will tell you whether this is a real project or whether you should throw down the lawn chairs and let it go. Now, for me, that's worth putting a little money on black, right? I'm not going to tell you to put your mortgage payment on it, but if he gets good results, this thing goes from 5.5 cents to I don't know what, but it will be a lot more than 5.5 cents. If he gets average results, it will stay where it is. If he gets shitty results, we'll pack up the card table and we'll go. Along similar lines, Standard Uranium, STND. This is John Bay's baby. Now, Standard is in a similar situation to Azincourt. A little bit newer, but they're out there at that same pre-discovery phase, and they're starting their drill program, and they're not out there yelling about it. They're not making wild promises. They're just putting the money into the ground, and they're going to let what they think is there tell the story. If you talk to Standard, they have been on the bandwagon trail from institutional investor to institutional investor to institutional investor for a year now. John Bay has got more frequent flyer points than I care to think about. And so Azincourt, I like because it's high risk, high reward, but the downside of it is minimal. Standard, same deal. They've raised their money. They're doing their drilling. The downside is they come up with sand and a few shells. The upside is they come up with a bunch of uranium and a high Geiger counter notes, a squealing radioactivity detector, and everybody jumps up and down and says, let's go. Neither of these 2 properties do need a massive amount of drilling. They just need the drilling that they're doing, that they've already paid for, already raised the money for, and already out there doing on the property. I like it. I think both of these guys are stand-up guys. I think both of them will stand up for investors. They've made no promises that they couldn't keep, and they're out there doing the work. There are 100 companies that are uranium exploration companies. Not many are doing the actual work. These guys are. Azincourt, AAZ, and Standard, STND. One more to talk about while we're on the topic, Sky Harbor, SYH. This thing's run by Jordan Trimble, who, man, when he came on the scene, people were like, who's this young kid? Pretending he's a mining guy. Now people come to him for advice. Jordan Trimble is a smart dude who has raised money well, who has got lots of good projects, who has got lots of big partners. He's got respect up and down the food chain. He's got big partners that he brings in to do the work on his project. He's got small partners that bring him properties that he can farm out. He's a prospect generator in the uranium market. He's smack dab in the middle of the big producers and the little explorers. He's a friend to everybody. He's doing deals with everybody. And if uranium takes off, it'll be the prospect generator with runs on the board that is the first one to fly. SYH, for me, is a good mid-range, mid-risk, mid-reward pick. You're much more likely to get a return with a guy who has multiple projects. That return might be shared with others, so it might be less upside than some of the small guys. The small guys are your table stakes, right? These guys are, you put your play money down. If they pull out a big win, the win is going to be massive. If they get just a little win, that's fine. But there's more risk there, right? More risk, more return. Sky Harbor, much less risk, much lower potential upside because they've already achieved a certain valuation. To me, you use these three as good bets across the table, so that whatever happens with the industry, as long as uranium goes up, you're going to do well with these three, or at least some of these three. This is what I call the uranium super friends. These are the three guys that I specifically went out and said, I'm making a real move on uranium and I want you three with me because I believe in what you three are doing. This wasn't a case of them coming to me and saying, hey, we're companies, we want people to talk about us, we happen to be neighbors and know each other and be even doing business with each other in some instances. This was me going out to the three companies that I like best in this space. The mid-range prospect generator and the two bets off to the side with high upside. If you've got a couple of $1,000 and you think that that's a good way to spend it, and you don't care about what's happening on the day-to-day, it could be 5.5 cents today, it could be 4, it could be 6, it could be 7. What you're looking for is for an Azincourt to shoot from 5.5 cents to 50. You're looking for a standard to shoot from around the same stage to the same stage. These are good little companies that if you're going to look at your portfolio every day and say, oh my God, it's down a cent, you're going to go mental. Don't do it if that's the kind of investor you are. But if you're the kind of investor that says, I see a place in the next 2 to 3 years where uranium and nuclear energy starts to really move forward, these are three that I think are going to be part of that move. Now, they're clients of ours, but they're clients of ours because that's the way we sought to do it. We reached out to them and said, you're our three picks, let's go. And so far, the returns have been pretty good. The last month, uranium has taken a bit of a slump, but I expect that to be very temporary. And over the long haul, macroeconomically, you've got war happening in Russia and the Ukraine. You've got a lot of uranium in places where you don't maybe have a reliable supply. I think Canadian uranium is the next big thing, and I'm willing to stake a lot of my wealth on it. STND, SYH, and AAC.